Air India 182. The bombing Canada tried to forget. June 23, 1985. 7:14 Greenwich Mean Time. 31,000 feet above the Atlantic off the coast of Cork, Ireland. Air India Flight 182, a Boeing 747 named Kanishka, vanishes from radar in an instant. All 329 people aboard are dead before wreckage hits the water. 59 minutes earlier, at Narita Airport in Tokyo, a second bomb detonates in a baggage cart, killing 2 ground handlers instantly. Both devices were checked onto planes in Vancouver, Canada. Both were built by the same hands. This was, at the time, the deadliest act of aviation terrorism in world history. It happened almost entirely on Canadian soil, planned by Canadian citizens, using Canadian airports. And yet, for nearly 2 decades, Canada would investigate this atrocity as if it belonged to someone else. The question is not simply who built the bombs. The question is why the country where they were built spent 20 years failing to hold anyone fully accountable. To understand how this was allowed to happen, we have to look at the invisible architecture protecting Canada from political violence in 1985. The divided relationship between its intelligence service and its police force. The Canadian Security Intelligence Service, CSIS, had been created only a year earlier, split off from the RCMP specifically to gather intelligence, not evidence. The RCMP, meanwhile, remained responsible for criminal investigation and prosecution. Intelligence gathered by CSIS was not automatically shareable as courtroom evidence. This was a deliberate legal firewall designed to protect informants and sources. In theory, the 2 agencies would cooperate. In practice, this structure created a gap large enough for an assassination plot to pass straight through, largely unnoticed by the system meant to stop it. By June of 1985, CSIS already had reason for concern. Talwinder Singh Parmar, a Sikh separatist leader wanted in India for the killing of 2 police officers, was living openly in Vancouver, having been denied extradition by Canadian courts. He led a militant group called Babar Khalsa, formed in the wake of the Indian government's 1984 raid on the Golden Temple in Amritsar. On June 4, 1985, just 19 days before the bombing, CSIS surveillance agents watched Parmar and an electronics repairman named Inderjit Singh Rayat walk into the woods on Vancouver Island. Agents heard a loud explosion. They assumed it was gunfire. No photographs were taken. No search followed. It was, investigators would later determine, a live test of the very bomb design used 17 days later. On June 20th, 2 airline reservations were placed in the names of M. Singh and L. Singh for connecting flights carrying luggage toward Tokyo and Toronto. Neither man ever boarded a plane. On June 22nd, an airline reservation agent in Vancouver received a call from the man calling himself M. Singh. He asked whether his checked bag could be sent onward to Delhi, even though he remained waitlisted and might not board the connecting flight himself. Under standard airline security rules, checked luggage was not supposed to fly without its passenger. The agent told him the bag could not be sent unless his reservation was confirmed. It was confirmed anyway. His suitcase was loaded onto Canadian Pacific Flight 060 to Toronto, transferred to Air India Flight 181, and then to Flight 182, continuing toward Delhi and Bombay. The second bag, checked under the name L. Singh, was loaded onto Canadian Pacific Flight 003 bound for Narita, intended for transfer onto another Air India flight to Bangkok. Neither M. Singh nor L. Singh ever appeared to claim a boarding pass. At Narita, the L. Singh bag detonated early while still being transferred between aircraft, killing 2 baggage handlers instantly. 59 minutes later, the M. Singh bag exploded inside Flight 182 over the Atlantic. This is where the story stops being about a bombing and becomes about what came after. Within days, a Canadian Security Intelligence Service informant named Surjan Singh Gill, who had infiltrated the Babar Khalsa's inner circle, was pulled from the case entirely, just 3 days before the bombing occurred. CSIS had been running wiretaps on Parmar's phone lines for months, but in the years following the attack, a CSIS agent later admitted to destroying approximately 150 hours of taped conversations, citing concern for protecting informant identities from the RCMP. Those tapes were evidence of a plot the tapes themselves might have helped stop. On November 8, 1985, RCMP raided the homes of Parmar and Rayat, charging them with explosives and weapons offenses. Rayat was convicted only of possessing illegal weapons and fined $2,000. Charges against Parmar were dropped entirely for lack of evidence. Investigators believed Parmar was the mastermind. He would never face trial for it. In 1992, he was reportedly killed by Indian police during a gun battle in Punjab. Rayat was eventually convicted in 1991 for the Narita bombing, sentenced to 10 years. In 2003, he pleaded guilty to manslaughter over the Flight 182 bombing itself, receiving 5 more years, while insisting under oath that he had no knowledge of the wider conspiracy or who else was involved. In 2010, he was convicted of perjury for that very testimony. 27 separate instances of lying to the court and sentenced to 9 additional years. The largest reckoning came in 2003 when Ripudaman Singh Malik and Ajaib Singh Bagri were finally charged with 329 counts of first-degree murder. A special high-security courtroom, Courtroom 20, was purpose-built in Vancouver at a cost of $7.2 million. The trial ran for 19 months, hearing testimony from 115 witnesses. On March 16, 2005, Justice Ian Josephson delivered his verdict, not guilty on all counts. He ruled that the Crown's key witnesses, including one who claimed to have heard a personal confession, were unreliable and possibly biased. 20 years after the bombing, only one man, Rayat, had ever been convicted of anything directly connected to the deaths of 331 people. The Government of Canada eventually commissioned a formal review. Bob Ray's 2005 report, and later a full public inquiry led by former Supreme Court Justice John C. Major, released its findings on June 17, 2010. The conclusion was blunt. A cascading series of errors by the Government of Canada, the RCMP, and CSIS had allowed the attack to happen and then compromised the pursuit of justice for decades afterward. The consequences reshaped how Western nations treat aviation terrorism and domestic intelligence sharing. The Major Commission's findings directly informed reforms requiring closer, legally structured cooperation between Canada's intelligence and law enforcement bodies, a lesson other nations, including the United States after September 11th, would study closely. Canada's own post-9/11 legal architecture and international conversations about intelligence-to-evidence conversion trace their lineage partly back to the failures exposed by this case. And in 2022, the story took one final, unresolved turn. On July 14th, Ripudaman Singh Malik, the man acquitted 17 years earlier, was shot dead outside his business in Surrey, British Columbia. His killers have never named a motive publicly tied to Air India. The case, in every sense, remains open. What this story ultimately reveals is not simply that a terrorist plot slipped through the cracks of an intelligence apparatus. It is that when institutions built to protect each other's secrets refuse to share them, justice itself becomes collateral damage. Two competing bureaucracies, each following their own internal logic, produced a result no single official would have chosen: an act of mass murder followed by 20 years of near-total impunity. The tapes were destroyed to protect sources. The informant was withdrawn to protect an operation. Every choice, in isolation, had a defensible justification. Together, they built a wall between evidence and truth that even a $7.2 million courtroom could not tear down. Does a system like this truly keep us safe, or is it just an illusion, held together by agencies more loyal to their own secrecy than to the people they are sworn to protect? Let us know in the comments what you think. And in the meantime, thank you very much for watching.